And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. It is an emergency, unedited conversation as the U.S. men's national team official Twitter account, first rumored by Doug McIntyre, now officially confirmed 2 minutes ago. Gregg Berhalter has been relieved of his men's national team duties. We're going to chat about his legacy with this group. We're going to chat about what his second cycle meant and did to the USMNT in general. We're going to talk about what's next for the USMNT coach, who's coming in next, and what's next for Gregg. I am, of course, joined by Connor. Connor, how you doing?
I I guess I'm doing good. I mean, I'm happy that this happened, but I'm not surprised that it happened.
I'm never like going to celebrate somebody being fired. I feel like that's kind of like a weird thing to do. I know it's like a sporting thing, but that's just a weird thing for me. Like I just can't get behind being like, "Oh my god, somebody lost his job." Like just feels weird.
Yeah, it is a weird feeling, and then I remember that he makes millions, so I feel a
Yeah.
little bit less bad
Yeah, that's
about
fair too. Um well listen, we got to do scar for the week. And then we'll just jump right into it because like we said, this is going to be unedited and just pure reactions, thoughts, vibes. So, Connor, what do you got?
it. I just grabbed the first scarf in my closet. Has no ties to anything. Just panic, unedited episode, unedited scarf.
Are
That's
you
what you're
saying
getting.
Bradley Carnell, the men's national team head coach?
That's definitely not. But maybe I'm saying Greg to St. Louis.
That's dangerous. I love it.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
sorry I said that St. Louis. You know what? I'm
uh,
doing reverse curse on St. Louis. That's what I'm
there you
doing.
go. Yep, I just grabbed the first U.S. scarf off the top, the one that we used for the last time we did this. So, all right, listen, we're here. We're in. Gregg Berhalter's done. When it's all said and done, the dust settles. And actually, first we need to get up and give a standing ovation to all the people who never bought a Michelob Ultra in the last week and a half, who canceled their internet subscription, who chose to buy a
Sold their
completely
Volkswagens.
different car instead of a Volkswagen. Like big ups to the six people who did that. Goodness me, you guys, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. Nobody can at all say that the U.S. men's national team is not purely American because there's nothing more American than a massive company slash corporation making a decision and letting people think that they influenced them in making that decision because they were on social media. So big ups the men's national team for that. Let's then chat legacy. Dust settles. It's all said and done. The USMNT stand accounts have gone out and they've felt the grass. They've seen the sun. What is Gregg Berhalter's legacy by the end of this debacle?
Can you remind me again? Was it after the World Cup where they made the second rehire for him?
Yes. So after the World Cup, he was like his contract expired. I guess they didn't re-sign him
Mhm.
right away, and then he came back after his contract expired.
Okay, gotcha. I want to say that if the Greg Berhalter legacy had cut off at that point and he was done after the World Cup, I'd see a much stronger argument for saying that his time with the US was definitely not that bad. Lots of good points during his legacy during that first stint with the USMNT. Gold Cup win with I guess I'll say like undervalued roster because it wasn't your typical like full European team.
Like
He
your
brought in
C
like
team,
a
wasn't it?
what'd you say?
It's like the C team, wasn't it? Wasn't that
It was
the
like the all
yeah? We had like
MLS team. I
Jackson
mean,
Ewell playing center mid.
he found some like guys that would become A team players from that, like
Sure.
Walker Zimmerman and
Yep.
Miles Robinson.
Sure.
I think Matt Turner kind of that was his
That was
standout
his
was that
break. Yeah,
goaltender.
you're absolutely right.
Um, but yeah, that was a great Gold Cup run from him with our C team at the time, as you're saying. And then couple of really like insanely memorable wins during that era too. I'll never forget that 3-2 Nations League final over Mexico. One of the best games that we've probably ever seen in our lifetime. Uh, in the World Cup, it was a little bit disappointing considering how we showed against the Netherlands, but at the end of the day, we did still get out of our group. Um, Definitely could have asked for more, but at the same time, it's not the absolute biggest letdown considering we were still able to get out of the group. Obviously, we want to strive for more, but it was at least a step in a better direction. I would have I would hear the argument for saying that his time with the US was not that was pretty solid. But then that second stint with the team, I just feel like was terrible. Like it was brutal. Like I don't feel like he did anything really too memorable in the second stint. I mean, I know he actually did. I can't even remember. Was he in charge for when we won the Nations League final? I know he didn't coach a few games in the Nations League to get us there. I think he might have been in charge for the final.
No, Greg had it was BJ's
Wait, was he there for the full way?
yeah, BJ had
I think he was
the
Mexico and
full
Canada.
Nations League, but
Okay,
Greg right now has the 2019-2020 Nations League and the Gold Cup in 21. Then BJ Callahan had the 22 Nations League.
gotcha. Okay, I couldn't remember if those Mexico Canada games were quarterfinal, semifinal, or if they were semifinal, final. But that mean that taints it even worse. The second stint. So then, I'm guessing he won nothing then, and got us knocked down the group stages at Copa America. So everyone's going to remember that second stint from his time with the US. People aren't going to remember him for anything he did in the first stint. And so it's going to leave a very bad taste in people's mouth. I mean, you could see it already. I mean, just look at any tweet regarding Berhalter on Twitter, and you will see how people feel about his stint as USMNT manager. Maybe people will look back on it with a little bit kinder views now that he's gone and, maybe give it a little bit of time for the dust to settle. But I don't really blame people for the way that they feel. That second stint was brutal and it was a huge letdown. I feel like the team has gone backwards. And because it's the last things he was doing before he was gone, I think it's what people will remember from him.
You're really good at just combining all the talking points into one. Because half of that whole thing was what did his second cycle have an impact on?
Well, you asked me what his legacy was. His legacy is part of the first and the second part.
Yeah. So that's fair. That's fair. For me, and we've talked about this before, Greg did exactly what he was hired to do the first time. He took a young team that had to come up relatively quickly because they were basically cycling out everybody from 2018. And through pure grit and determination, he turned them into the best team in the Confederation in CONCACAF. And you can say, "Oh, well, that's Mexico's bad and Canada's was terrible." Yeah, they brought him in, and that was his job: was to not be worse than the worst people around him, and he did his job. He got out of the group in 22. You can say maybe it was a bit lucky. You can say, you can say a lot of things about it, and you'd probably be right about it. But he did his job. I agree with you that when he came back, it was the wrong move, and we've talked about that too. That all of this stuff is really not great. But yeah, if you look at just records, 44 wins, 17 draws, 13 losses, I think is how that's read. Um, I think statistically, the numbers are all in his favor. He created a really strong group against not so strong opponents, right? But we can't just look at stats. So we know that he doesn't have a lot of those big wins. We know that he doesn't perform well away from home. We know all of that. That's not a thing. So to me, Gregg Berhalter, legacy wise, is a guy who did his job and was asked to do too much afterwards. Because when he came in, he took, as we mentioned, he took that really young team that really didn't have a lot of international experience and he turned them into the best team in CONCACAF. However, he, trying to think of the right way to phrase this. This is why it's tough to do it unedited or right off the bat with no prep because I want to phrase it right so I can get my points across. Where he didn't take them to the next level. He didn't get them better, I think is a way to put that. Like he got them to a point where they were the best, but he could never get them, in the Confederation, but he could never get them to the point of being the best of North and South America or in the top five of North and South America. And we saw that in the Copa, right? Like he got them to a point, and it reminds me very similarly of Gary Smith at Nashville. He did all that he could with the group that he had. Then he was, and we've talked about that too. He then was outmatched with their ability to understand the game and his ability to coach it. So to me, he is not, people are going to say, oh, he's the best statistical manager we've ever had. I don't think Klinsmann was better than him. I think they each had their own problems. I don't think Gregg is the best coach we've ever had. I mean, statistically, you can always make the argument for it, but if you watch the games, you understand what that really means. I think he did his job and was here too long, as you mentioned. So, and I'm sure people will disagree, and I think you mentioned too. Everybody's going to remember the failures more than the successes, and that's totally fair, especially in the world of social media, where the only thing you can remember is the last 2 minutes. But if you look as a whole, what he took over and where he got them to, he did his job, and that needs to be taken into account for sure.
For me, the stats really don't mean much until I can see another manager come in with the same group in the same situation or similar situation and see what their stats look like. Because to me, he's coming in with the strongest team that we've ever had, and I know that's probably not the best take right now, considering where the national team is at the moment. But I still think this is, at least technically speaking, the best team we've ever had, and the rest of the region. I shouldn't say the rest of the region. Canada's probably kind of at their one of their best moments too, but Mexico is like way below where Mexico used to be. So to be able to just beat up on teams in the region, like Costa Rica, no Keylor Navas anymore is a huge hit for them. Like he was playing against teams that were at some of their worst points. And so it felt a bit like stat padding. So I want to see what like another manager does with the similar situation before I'm like I don't think it's fair to compare him against like Bruce Arena or Bob Bradley and what they did with the USMNT, because they were just working in my opinion, a completely different situation than what Gregg was. Even if Gregg is like statistically the best ever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think there's and that's the only way to make a fair comparison, right? And I think the problem with Gregg was, people were talking about, oh, they got too comfortable with him. And I would agree with that. I think there is a level of comfort you have to have with a coach, right? You can't just come in and expect this guy to be just somebody who just barks orders at you and you listen, right? To perform for somebody, you want to have a good relationship with them so that you want to, perform for them, not because you have to, right? That's how you get bad egos and bad locker rooms and all that good stuff. But there definitely can be an argument made where they were a little too comfortable with them, where one of two things. One, it felt like a lot of them, and this might not necessarily be on Gregg, but it felt like a lot of them didn't fear that their starting spot was in jeopardy. Um, like there really wasn't a ton up next. So they didn't have to fear like, oh, I have a bad result. Like, uh-oh, now what? Right. Um, and from there, it also felt like maybe Gregg wasn't pushing them hard enough. The more information that comes out about it, that he was kind of, and I say all of this because this is kind of an approach we took at Alfred, where we came in and we had a bunch of people who needed to learn a system, learn a game, and learn the way a new coach was doing it. And our first thing was like, we're not going to go in and be toxic to each other. We're not going to go in and be, we're not going to rip each other apart. We're going to build each other up. And that works for, the beginning couple of years where you're all then on board and saying, okay, good, we're moving in the right direction. Everything's good. Everything's great. But there always comes a point in that sort of buildup where it's not good enough anymore. And that is something that I've seen, or that's something I can imagine happening here, where the that like camaraderie that they had in that locker room let them down. And it's at that point that the coach now needs to change his tone and say, you know what, listen, we've done this enough. Everybody's good friends. You now can understand that if somebody gets on you for to do a little bit better, it's not that they don't like you or they're not, they're expecting more out of you because they know you can give more, right? I think that's probably a part of what was missing in this whole thing. So there's a lot of things. I mean, you can talk about his tactics and his motivation, but at the end of the day, a change needed to be made, if for no other reason than to spark up a little bit of extra energy and get them into a more focused mindset, if you will.
Is that your way of leading into who's the next one in charge?
No, I mean, I was kind of gonna go to what's next.
Hopefully, a new coach.
Yeah, we've kind of covered the second cycle impact a little bit, right? They got comfortable. Do you want to add anything onto the second cycle impact? Did you have anything else you wanted to share on that?
It was just clearly it was the wrong decision, like in every way, shape, and form. And I know all the focus is on. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I've seen plenty of people call out like the whole organization, but his second stint is an absolute like bright light on the failure of everybody at the Federation. Like that was 100% like the wrong decision. You wasted time, this whole search, and then you brought back the same manager, and he absolutely laid a goose egg in his second stint with the team. Like it couldn't have been a bigger swing and a miss from the Federation. And Greg shouldn't be the only one that pays the price for that. I hope other people kind of get their same like comeuppance as whatever that saying is for their failures as well. It shouldn't just all be on Greg.
I think so. I've seen that a lot on social media too, and I think that's where we need to take a step back because in that room, when making those decisions, the one thing that nobody knows about, I mean, at least most of us don't know about, I can't say nobody, I think that's unfair, is who actually was available to take the job and was anybody actually better than what we had at the time. And I understand the sentiment, right? Like you guys did all this work and just to bring a guy back who clearly wasn't ready for it. And you know that coaches who go through a second cycle never have enough success and all these data points that point to it being a bad decision. If the only other option was bringing on Anthony Hudson, well, what are you going to do? Right now, again, I say that as somebody who has no idea who was interviewed or what they were doing or anything like that. But I'm also kind of never the person to jump on and throw the torches and the pitchforks up in the air and say burn it all down. Right. So if somebody comes in and says, "Oh, these people were all hired and turned down and in favor of Greg," then sure, yeah, I'm on board. But
Well,
until then, until I have that information, I'm not going to jump on board with that.
in fairness too, this is just a better time of the year if you are going to move on from the manager because them doing it right at the end of the Winter World Cup meant that a lot of teams were in mid-season. So if you're finding a manager who's available at that time, it's probably because they were not doing a very good job and got fired. Nobody's leaving mid-season to like just go be a free agent manager. But if you do it now in the summer, right after the season's finished, or like, relatively within the end of the season, you're going to find good managers who are available because they've just moved on from their last team. Maybe they're looking for something new or whatever. You're not only just going to get people who are available because they got fired because they were doing a terrible job at their last team. So I think the timing of it this time around is a bit better. So I'm hoping, like you were saying, they'll have more options in the boardroom this time rather than just having to settle with something.
Now that is a great segue to the next section. So there are rumors. Rumors are out there that a bunch of people are already in, actually it's not a rumor. It was mentioned already that the search for a coach is underway, which mean and they put out this whole list, right? Jurgen Klopp's on there. Garrett Southgate's on there. Thierry Henry's on there. Bob Bradley's still on there. So there are really, I think, two main options of who can take over. Bruce Arena finally comes back from the dead and takes over again, or USMNT does the funniest thing, and Gregg Berhalter round 3 is underway as like in a week.
There's no way.
Bro, they fired him just to appease the Twitter warriors, just to bring him back. I think the world would burn down.
That would be, oh my God, that would be an absolute nightmare.
All right, well, let's do this then. Who do you want? Who's realistic? And who do you want is your long shot? Who do you want as like a realistic pick? And who do you think they're going to get? We'll do all three.
Ooh, who do I want? You know who I want. We only support one manager on this podcast, and that's Wilfred Nancy to the USMNT. That is absolutely wholeheartedly who I want. I know he's an MLS manager, but I truly believe in everything in my body that he can get the best out of a group playing internationally. What I don't want, and this is segueing into my what I think is the most likely, is that they end up with someone like Steve Cherundolo, who I think is a better manager than Gregg. I want to just fully say that for any LAFC fans that are listening. 100% he's a better manager than Gregg. He's already proven that. But I feel like if we bring in Cherundolo, we're getting just a slightly better version of Gregg. I think it's a defense first coach again who only has MLS coaching experience. Actually, well, he was, I think Justin was saying he had some assistant coaching experience with Hanover. But in terms of being a head coach, and I don't believe I'm missing anything, but I think he's only been a head coach in the US. Um, so I just don't know how much that's going to help the team transition away from what Gregg was bringing to the table into something where they're more used to playing at the club level, where they're seemingly doing better than they are at the national team level. And then Dream one, I mean, Wilfred Nancy kind of also falls on that. Like he is my preference, and I think it's unlikely, so he kind of falls into the dream category. But for the sake of picking somebody different, I'll go with, and this is a tentative one because I'd want to look into his more recent numbers because I don't know what he's been doing much as of late. But Patrick Vieira, I kind of like as a shout for the team. I think it's a bit of a long shot. Obviously, he has experience coaching in the US, so I'm sure he's made some connections here. So it may not be like a super long shot, but he did a really good job when he was here with NYCFC. And I know he has plenty of coaching experience in Europe so far. So I think that combined can translate well bringing into the national team. So I definitely want to go down the European international route. I don't want to repeat of bringing in another MLS manager. We've been doing that for forever. I feel like I'd like to see something different. I know some other people feel the same way. So those are my three.
I think you're out of your mind calling Steve Cherundolo's LAFC a defense first team.
They're
But
one of the best defensive teams in the league.
yeah, and they scored a ridiculous amount of goals. What do you mean?
I mean, yeah, I mean, out of the
Yeah, that's
top
what I
five
thought.
teams in the West, they've scored the least. But I guess in fairness, they have played a little bit less games than the others. It's not that they don't score. I don't want to sorry. I feel like when I said defense first, they made it sound like they don't score, but I feel like he was a defender and his team is really strong at defending. I feel like that's the first priority. It's not that he doesn't have a good attacking team, but I feel like it's defense first. Like LAFC before he took over was high flying, tons of goal scoring, defense second. And I feel like that's transitioned into defense first now, and then we add the attack in as well.
Good save, good cover.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. So I mean, I I
You
am
better say
kind
you
of
better say your favorite is Wilfred Nancy, or
oh
you're off the
100%. In
pot.
this household, we stand Wilfred Nancy and we manifest Wilfred Nancy to USMNT. However, I don't believe that's something that's going to happen. My my thought is it's going to be Steve Cherundolo simply because it would just be too funny for all these guys thinking that they're going to cancel the USMNT until Gregg is fired, and then they're going to get Klopp and everything's going to be beautiful and magical and wonderful, just to turn around and get Steve Cherundolo. I think it just writes itself. But I also think it's the most realistic option because Jurgen Klopp's already said like I might go to the USA, but at the end of the day, he left saying he was burnt out. Can you imagine this guy coming into the USMNT and just handling a bunch of what I'm going to call overhyped players right now? Dude's going to come in and be like, "Oh yeah, I'll take over," and then it's just going to be like Brendan Aronson is just running around just hitting people, and Tyler Adams is hurt for the 19th time, and he's like, "What am I supposed to do with this group?" You know. Um, I liked your shout on Patrick Vieira. I thought that'd be interesting. However, I don't think he's going to leave for that. I yeah, I'm sticking with Steve Sharon though here, just because I think, and I don't think it's necessarily the right option. Um, I think it's the option that's going to happen. For some reason, I just don't feel the USMNT getting some big name, like big blow out the sky manager. Like it just doesn't
Oh,
feel like that's something that's going to happen, you know?
mhm.
And I just saw the reason I just hesitated there is because I just saw something on an interview from Matt Crocker saying like, what's going to be different now before the last 12 months. And he said, like, I'm in a position to go hard and go off. And like, I've been here long enough to know what we're doing and I'm ready to go. That doesn't mean you're going to get things across the line, you know? So I am not holding my breath for anything. I'm not going to expect anything. But whoever comes in, they've got my full support because at the end of the day, it doesn't do anybody any favors if I'm going to sit there and scream and cry over, you know, not having somebody there because at the end of the day, I don't wish ill upon my national team as much as, you know, I am club over country first, but I want the U.S. to win as much as I can. So it doesn't make sense for me to go in and be like, if we don't get Jose Mourinho and Jurgen Klopp as an assistant manager duo, I'm not supporting this team and I'm canceling anything that has to do. No, it doesn't make sense. I didn't know if you wanted to add on to that, say like, oh, that's a great point. Like you're totally right.
I mean, I mean, I don't want to tell you too much to boast you because otherwise your head might explode. But but no, you are right. I mean, listen, the reality is Jurgen Klopp is not coming. And if I'm proven wrong, that's great. I would happily be proven wrong.
100%.
But it's not happening. And I think you're spot on and I'm in agreement with you that I don't want it to happen, but I do think that the most likely option is like a Steve Cherundolo or similar archetype.
Nice. Good
I don't
work.
know who the other similar archetype would be, but maybe Pat Noonan. I don't know.
Well, it's funny because he's never mentioned in there, but I think he's a better manager than Dolo is. So
I would be inclined to agree. He's done
uh,
an insane job with FCC.
in before Colorado Rapids are in for a new head coach because Chris
Oh
Armas is
my
going to the men's national team.
God.
I
I'll
love it.
actually start boycotting all the companies if Chris Armas gets in charge.
All right. Well, one last question before we go. What's next for Greg? Where does he go? I heard that there's a spot down south that has an
Nope,
open
nope.
manager spot.
It's filled. Nope, sorry.
By
No app.
who?
We're not
You
not
took
taking
over?
applications. Hopefully he just takes some time off for now, let things settle. I think if he jumps into something too quickly, I don't think it'd be good for him or the team, at least in terms of like the press. But I feel like he'll find his way back into an MLS side at some point. Um, Maybe he goes overseas again and tries his hand, kind of like what Bob Bradley's doing right now. Maybe he takes something there, kind of gets his feet settled again, and then I don't think it's the last we've seen of Berhalter in MLS. And it's not me saying that I want that to happen, but just look at the way this league recycles managers. I think at some point in time he will be back in MLS.
Yeah,
Just
that's right.
hopefully not with Atlanta.
Well, that answers my question because there was somebody who had put out a tweet that was I think it was Fabian Rankel, and he was like, "There is no way any MLS team should want Greg back and want him in the in their team or whatever." And I think that's a stretch, right? Like the club game and the national team game, two completely different games, right? Especially in MLS where it's a salary cap league, but you only get what you're dealt. in the national team. And there's always a little bit there where you can mention like your selections, right? Maybe you select better than others or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's however the clubs are developing their players. That's what you got to work with. Now, did he do a good job with what he had? I don't think so, but it's a different game, right? So going back to MLS and being able to build a philosophy from the ground up again with the ability to buy or develop players in a system that he wants could give him fine success, right? I don't think I agree with you. I don't think his coaching career is done. Um, I think he stays at home instead of goes abroad. I just don't think, you know, I don't really see it over there. He was more successful at home anyway. But yeah, there are a couple open spots in MLS, and we joke about Atlanta, but I would agree with you that it's not happening soon. But at the end of the year, if coaches start going and people are looking for things, I think his name gets floated around there. I think we see him next season, and I wouldn't be against that, right? I don't think he's got bad ideas for a club team or a specific or a team that he can build on his own. I think he had bad tactical ideas for the group that he had, and he wasn't good enough, or he was too reluctant to change them. That is the way I'll put that. So I don't see him as his coaching career is over because of this. I think he just needs to find the right landing home, and his style of play could work with the right players. It's just these weren't the right players, and he was too reluctant to change to what could work.
I mean, he wasn't a world beater when he was previously a coach in MLS, so uh, I'm not like sold on him coming back and like being great, even though he was good with the national team. And I understand that, he's kind of got his hands tied on who he can bring in. He can't just bring in a full MLS squad to match his tactics because he'd get crucified for that. But I mean, I think he comes back to MLS, like I said. I mean, it's a league which brought back Chris Armas, Phil Neville. Like they clearly like to bring back managers that are familiar with the league. I think they place too much value on familiarity with the league and salary cap rules over people who can come in and prove that they can do or win games tactically. Um, and with that in mind, I think Berhalter has a leg up on a lot of other managers.
Yeah, and it's I don't think it's again it'll be interesting, right? It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Um, but yeah, I don't think I'd say he's done or nobody should want him back. Like I think the people who are saying that again are recognizing. You know what he'd be a half decent shout for is one of those teams that, and I want to say, I think San Jose is a cheap shot almost, but a team that just, and we talk about it a lot. When you're down in the basement, you need somebody to come in and say, we are not going to concede as easily, or we're not going to get broken down as easily. We're going to be hard nosed. We're going to do the work. That's what Gregg does, right? So I wouldn't be shocked to see him come in. Oh man, how wild would it be if he goes to like Chicago, right? A Chicago team that's been down for a decade and is like, yo, the way we're going to stop this is just by being hard nosed and just doing the job that has to be done.
I feel like the problem is you get like a Gary Smith situation where it's like, okay, maybe he can take them out of the ground and make them like a more consistent playoff team, but I feel like his ceiling is capped. Like I
Well,
don't
well,
see him
well,
as like
and
a
what's
top
there,
level,
that's not a problem, right? You need
but it
somebody
isn't like
you
what
need somebody
but
to change. Good.
but if you're not going to win anything, then like what's the point? Like you're just bringing him in to just make the playoffs every year, and like
Culture
you're not going to
change.
bring him in, but you're not going to bring him in like let's see keep him for 3 years. He gets them from last place to like the play in to now you're just straight in the playoffs. You're not gonna fire him at that point. Like he's continuously building up. You're gonna have to wait until he either like plateaus or you got to wait for him to fall back down again. And it's like, all right, well, we did all that for what?
Sam Allardyce gets paid millions and millions of dollars every year to come in and save teams from the bottom, just to be there. right?
That's a completely different situation. They make
Listen,
tons of money just
listen,
staying in the league.
listen. Stop speaking. Listen. Use your ears, not your
Don't say
mouth.
stupid things, and I'll stop speaking.
When you are down as bad as somebody like San Jose, Chicago, something like that, no, there is no relegation. You're not fighting for your lives in a league, but you need something to turn around a culture. You don't need somebody to come in and be like, we're going to go from worst to first tomorrow, because that's something that happens when you are. And I think FCC is the last time we're truly going to see something like that happen ever again. But you need somebody to come in and say, we're going to do the hard work. We're going to get a culture together that is about being tough to beat. We're not going to roll. We're not going to be the league's laughing stock anymore. We are going to go in and we are going to do a very, very good job at being hard to beat. And from there, you get confidence. And from confidence, you get results. You may not get to an MLS Cup final. You may not get to a supporter shield group, but you're developing a core of players who have a firm belief that they are not going to be rolled over game in and game out. And from there, you can build on that with a different manager, with different players around them who are then going to buy into a system when they come in. But if you don't do that groundwork first, and Chicago is a great example of it. Chicago are top buyers, right? Give me Shaqiri, give me this guy, give me Hugo Kuipers, give me all these 12, $15 million players to finish 10th and 11th every year, because they don't have that foundation, the bottom part, to push them to be a tough team to beat. If you develop that first, then you pick out the players in the TAM GAM area, in the DP area. That's how you build success. But you can't do that just by bringing in some fancy manager and saying, yep, here we go. We're going to fix it now. It doesn't work that way. That's what I think long term. I think that's Gregg's full legacy. His full legacy is going to be a guy who can come in and take a team that needs a culture change and get them to be either half decent or good, right? Because he took the national team and made them good, but he didn't make them great. We didn't win a World Cup with him. We won a couple Nations League, and we did that, in Gold Cups and stuff that we should be winning. But he didn't take them to a quarterfinal or a semifinal of the World Cup. We didn't get out of the group in Copa because that's his ceiling. But long term, he is going to be a guy that changes culture. Bruce Arena is a winner, but Bruce Arena was kind of that same guy that I remembered too. Was he's going to come in and just look at you and be like, "You guys all suck," so we're going to fix that by being, old school, and it worked. So that's what I can see Gregg doing, and it doesn't have to be an MLS, by the way. It could be somewhere else. But I'm just using MLS because I don't know if you guys know this, but we're an MLS podcast, so sometimes we talk about that league and we need to cover it. So
I disagree. I mean, I think it MLS is different than other leagues around the world, like the Premier League, where if you finish 17th and just avoid relegation, that's massive. That is a huge paycheck every single year. It's massive for the club to be able to reinvest. That's just not the same with MLS. You have a salary cap. There's only so much that you can do. You're not going to collect that much money just by, I mean, obviously everybody stays in the league, but you're not collecting the money just by existing in the league. Like to get to that level where you're getting that equivalent of being able to stay in the Premier League is to win things. And I just don't think Gregg is the manager to win things. Like you were saying, I don't even think you disagree with that. Gregg's not
no,
the
no, I
manager that's going
don't.
to win you shields. He's not going to win you cups.
No,
He's just
and
going
I
to
don't. And
he's
by
just
the
going to be
way,
someone that
I
gets
don't
you
want
in
to.
the
I don't want.
playoff.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm comparing an MLS playoff berth to surviving in the Premier League. What I was trying to compare is that you don't need to be a constant winner to be a valued coach, right? You don't need to go and win the league 15 times out of 16 to be a valuable coach to somebody. That's what I was trying to get at there. Yes, the stakes are completely different, but your value doesn't always have to come from trophies. It can come from a lot of intrinsic stuff that can change long term the scope of your club. That's where I was trying to go with that.
I think you got to go for someone that's got the potential to get you to the top because I do think you can go from worst to first, 100%. Like you could see it this year. I mean, Inter Miami 14th to second, LA Galaxy 14th to
Your
first.
first example is going to be the team that has the best player in the world.
He was
That's a
on the team for half the year last year.
that's a stretch. He didn't play in
I
half
mean,
those.
that's not the only example. Um, both the LA Galaxy and the Colorado Rapids from bottom of the West to in the top four at this point already.
Yeah, but that's
Like
not best. Hold on, that's not best.
they're okay. LA Galaxy are joint top of the West right now. They're right there. Like that's a team. LA Galaxy is a team that can 100% compete for the cup right now.
Okay, I'll give you that. That's fair. I didn't realize they were that high. I thought they were like fourth.
They're third, but there's three teams on 43 points right now. But and Colorado's only like 6 points behind them, so it's not like inconceivable that they're up there and fighting. But yeah, I mean it's a league of parity, which is a good thing for a lot of teams because you can see your team just turn it around all of a sudden and shoot all the way up in the standings. I mean, don't forget Austin. Austin was terrible the first year and then shot all the way up to second place in the West and the year after that. That's because this league has parity. So I say bring in a coach who has the potential to do that versus Greg, who is probably not going to do that for you and is just going to kind of give you an Asheville situation, like you said before when you compared him to Gary Smith, where you're just going to like get in the playoffs as the 7th seed and then get knocked out after like a game or two in the playoffs. It's like, okay, great, we laid this groundwork. Now what? Like we're just stuck.
I don't know how we went from Gregg Berhalter to a conversation on MLS coaching theory and what you need to build a team, but that's just what we do here. So I think we call
Tangent.
it there because we've gotten so far off topic.
That's fine. That's fair.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed this very quick, very last minute, early, unedited version of the pod. So apologies for the big breaks and stutter over our words. But if you enjoyed it, make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. When the next one goes live, we've got a top 10 coming for you in top 10 foreign managers, not including Greg, but including some people we've mentioned already. And then we will also be doing some more history and some more other things like that. So we need to bring back games at some point too. We got to work on that. But anyways, make sure you follow us on social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Those are where we interact with you the most, and we are working very hard to get to some milestones. We're at 641 on Twitter, trying to get to 700. We're at 484 on YouTube, trying to get to 5. We're on 396 on TikTok, trying to get to 4. So just help us get there. Go on, subscribe, and listen to us, and we'll chat and have a good time. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening again. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.